it's Tina and I am back with another quick swatch and review video for this palette here, which is the Sephora collection Jem and The Holograms collection. And this one is the Truly Outrageous Eyeshadow Palette. So let's go ahead and jump into the swatches and then we'll jump into the review. Let's go ahead and take a look at all 24 shades in this palette. So we're starting from light colors in the top to smoky shades in the bottom. And in the first row we have the shade Minx, Raya, Gal Pal, and Clash. Then we have the shades Hologram and Starlight. In the second row we have this shade Mrs. Bailey, Kimber, then Rockstar and Rockin Roadster. Then we have Synergy and Cassette. In the third row we have Stinger, Jerrica, 1980s, Keytar, then Rio and Stormer, followed by the final row where we have Jetta and Gemstar, Shanna, Pizzazz, Aja or Aya, and Misfits. Starting out with the swatches and the first row, we have the shade Minx, which is a golden champagne shade. It has really good color payoff. It is a light shade, but the pigmentation is there. Then we have the shade Raya, which is just a light shimmery champagne pink shade. This one is a sheer pigmentation, but I can see using it as a highlight, you wouldn't need it to be super pigmented. Then we have the shade Gal Pal, which is a matte ivory shade. This one has good pigmentation. Again, it's great for a highlight. It works out pretty well. It has really nice pigmentation, surprisingly. Then we have the shade Clash, which is a light shimmery ivory shade with a slight yellow undertone. Beautiful pigmentation. It applies really well. Here we have the shade Hologram, which is a very icy silver shade with silver sparkling glitter throughout it. This one has a little bit of chunky shimmer in it, so I can see it being fallout heavy, but it's a beautiful pigmented shade as well. And then last up in the top row, we have the shade Starlight, which is a matte white. This one looks similar to Starlight, but it is more white, and Starlight has a little bit more of a yellow undertone. So here we have the first 6 shades in the palette, and these are all highlight shades. They're all very light shades, and some of them look very similar to each other, so I don't think we needed all of these shades, but I mean, these are gonna work well on light skin tone, and the different nuances in undertone may show up there, but on my skin tone, I have very little use for these other than inner tear duct highlights and so forth. Moving on to the second row, we have the shade Mrs. Bailey, which is a beautiful peachy gold shade. It is really beautiful. It has a duochrome to it, so you'll see that peach and that yellow gold shimmering through. Then next to that we have the shade Kimber, which is a shimmery pink. It is a little deeper than the Raya shade. It has good pigmentation and beautiful shimmer to it. Now we have the shade Rockstar, which is a muted dusty lilac shade. It is toned down, but it's a beautiful shade with great pigmentation and beautiful shimmer. To me, it's an understated dusty lilac. Then we have the shade Rockin Roadster, which is a very sheer aquamarine shade. It's a sheer shade. It doesn't have the best pigmentation. That is 2 layers, and I'm not going to do more than that. Then we have the shade Synergy, which is just a dark gunmetal silver shade. This one is nice. It has good pigmentation, and it would make a beautiful smoky eye. And then last up we have the shade Cassette, which is a metallic, really pale silver shade. It's really great. It has good pigmentation. Really beautiful shade again. So here you see the second row of shades. A couple of shades out of this are really beautiful. The pink and the lavender shade in the middle are kind of similar, and that aquamarine shade is very sheer. But these shades overall have good pigmentation, again, except for that aquamarine shade. And they're actually really beautiful with a very subtle shimmer, so there has a nice sheen without being overwhelming or highly frosted. Moving on to the third row, we have the shade Stinger, which is a bronzy shade. It's a golden bronze. Has really nice pigmentation. Took one swipe to get that color payoff. Then we have the shade Jerrica, which is a magenta pink shade. It is not a bright in-your-face pink, but it has good pigmentation. It is more of a satin than a matte, and it's definitely not a shimmer, but it has decent pigmentation. Then we have the shade 1980s, which is a purple shade. This one has sheer color payoff. It doesn't really build up well, and again, it's more of a satin than a matte, but the pigmentation is just not there for this shade. Then we have the shade Keytar, which is a lime green shade. It is a shimmery shade. It doesn't have great pigmentation. Again, you do have to build it up, but if you're into these subtle green shades, that's a good one. Then we have the shade Rio, which is a intense aquamarine sea blue shade. It's really gorgeous, has really nice pigmentation, good color payoff. And then last up we have the shade Stormer, which is a stormy blue shade. It is a subtle blue shade. It does take a little bit to build it up, but decent color, not my favorite. Again, it's more of a satin finish than a shimmer. If you're into more subtle looks, this blue might actually work out for you. So here's that third row of shadows. I think the bronze shade and that bright blue shade are the best performers out of this row. The purple one leaves a lot to be desired. It's very sheer, it's choppy, it's patchy, but it is what it is. The pink, the green, and the darker blue are decent shades. They're more of a satin. They build up nicely, but they're subtle shades. They're understated shades. So if you want to wear a color and you want to go a little bit bolder than just your everyday neutral look, but you don't want to go bright and in your face, these are actually pretty nice shades to just use for a pop of color. They're not my kind of shades because they're not bright and intense. So that's the third row of shades. Now for the last row, we have the shade Jetta, which is a matte deep brown shade. It has great pigmentation. It actually builds up pretty nicely and it's nice and smooth. Then we have the shade Gemstar, which is a rich blackened shade with purple, magenta, blue, and a little bit of gold shimmer throughout it. Actually has great pigmentation and is a really beautiful shade. And then we have the shade Shana, which is a blackened burgundy shade, again with magenta, light purple, gold, and like a little bit of blue shimmer throughout it. Again, a nicely pigmented shade. That shimmer, I hope it holds on, but it's a beautiful, richly pigmented shade. Then we have the shade Pizzazz, which is a gunmetal silver shade. This one has good pigmentation. It has a hint of a green to it, which makes it even more interesting. It's a really beautiful shade. I like that one as well. Then we have the shade Aja or Aya. Which one is it? I'm gonna go with Aja because I like it. It's just a deep blue shade. It has some shimmer throughout it. It is a rich like navy blue. It's a beautiful shade as well. Has good pigmentation. Doesn't take a lot to build it up. And then last up we have the shade Misfits, which is just a matte black shade. This one is a nice black. It has good pigmentation, but it's not overly rich, so you can definitely build it up. I think that shade has good pigmentation and it would work well with the rest of the shades. So here you have a look at the final row of shadows, and all these shades had great pigmentation. They apply beautifully. They were smooth. You do have some glittery shades here though that are gonna have some fallout, so just be mindful of that. But oh my gosh, they're so beautiful. The shimmer in these are gorgeous. The blue and gunmetal shade are really nice too. This is just a rich smoky row. I think this one would work great for smoky looks, for intense looks. I think this row is actually my favorite row in the palette. Definitely a beautiful row of shadows. So now that you've seen the swatches, let's go ahead and jump into the review. And as usual, the first thing I like to talk about is the price. This palette retails for $39 and there are 24 eyeshadows in here, and they each measure 0.0183 ounces, or we'll just call it 0.02 ounces, and there are 24 shades like I said. So that means the eyeshadows are relatively small. So they are tiny eyeshadows. The palette is a small palette. When you really get it in person and see it, it's a small palette, but you get 24 shades and you do get a variety here to choose from. So it depends on how you view it. There are other palettes on the market that are obviously more expensive than this, but they contain more product overall. They might have less shades, but they have more overall product. Since this is pretty small and it does contain a small amount of product, but it depends on how you look at it. Pay less, get more colors. You don't really care if you run out of an eyeshadow. It's not that big a deal for you. Or if you're a collector and you love Jem and the Holograms, then you're gonna collect this anyway. Doesn't matter. It's up to you. Determine what you want to do with that. As for the packaging, it comes in a regular little plastic box. It has some information on the box. So if you want to keep the box, it's a good box to keep. It has the color names. It has details on the collaboration and then the ingredients on it. And then the actual palette itself is black and pink, which is reminiscent of Jem and the Holograms. And it has a little star here to go with Jem's star. And it says Sephora and Jem and the Holograms. And then on the back, it has the color names, so you can follow the color names there. The actual palette, so the black part of the palette is a black glitter. And it's not a glitter that rubs off. It does have an overlay that keeps the glitter in place. So it's not just gonna make a mess, but it has a little bit of a rough texture. It's not really smooth, but it's really nice. I like that they did something fun and funky, and it does have a folded little lid here with some more lightning bolts, which is signature Jem. And inside you have a pretty decent size mirror, but again, it falls over, so you'd have to hold it up if you want to use it. But it's a good size mirror. And I like the little clasp because it's magnetized and it folds over, so it makes your palette really secure to have that additional little fold, so it keeps it really secure. So I really like the packaging. I think it's sleek and nice, very functional, very easy to travel with, very secure and easy to store. So inside the palette you have 4 rows of 6 shades. And the rows are arranged by color theme. So you have light, kind of highlight, neutral shades on the top. Then you have more subdued wearable colors. Then you go down to more bright colors. And then the last row is more smoky shades. And I will say I was deceived looking online, because when I saw the promo images, I was like, yeah, did not follow Jem and the Holograms. Did not do that growing up. It was around, but I wasn't able because I didn't have cable. See how around there? You like that? But when I looked at the colors, I was like, yeah, I'm getting that, because the colors are bright, they're vivid, they're like in your face, and I'm like, yes, please, I am getting it. And the image that you see online, and I'll link it below so you can check it out. The image that you see online doesn't quite measure up to what you get in person, and that threw me off. When I got this, I was like, wait, why is it so dull? I thought Jem was bright and fun and bold and vibrant, and this is not. What is going on? And then you touch the eyeshadows, you do some swatches, and you're like, not so much. But I always swatch with a primer because that is more real world how I would use the eyeshadows anyway. So I swatch with a primer. Just in case you guys were wondering, I just put a very light layer on my arm, just a very light layer of eyeshadow primer, not a base or anything, and then I swatch with a brush because that is how I would apply in real life. And these applied so much better over a primer than alone. And a lot of people will say that to you. Swatch them over primer, use them with primer, they'll work better. And I think everyone nowadays, it's not like back in the day when eyeshadow primer was this mystery thing that makeup artists used. We actually, you know, commonplace, regular customers, regular consumers use eyeshadow primers. So it's not like outlandish for you to use an eyeshadow primer. You're gonna use one anyway, right? Like, when would you not? I use an eyeshadow primer. It's up to you what you do with your life, but get your life and use an eyeshadow primer. No, we're not, we're getting crazy here, but use an eyeshadow primer with these work really well. And I was surprised because when I got it, I was like, no, it's not bright enough, may I bring it back? And I was talking with one of my friends too, Jessica, and she was like, I don't think, I'm returning mine. And the thing is, I don't think it's necessarily polarized where people either love it or they hate it. I think there are people in the middle too that were expecting more and were disappointed. But I don't think you should judge a palette based on what you were expecting. I think you should judge it based on the performance. And even though I was expecting bright, bold, vibrant shades, and I was disappointed in that, I wasn't sorely disappointed by the performance. And a lot of people complain about Sephora eyeshadows, and I personally like the Sephora eyeshadow formula. I don't think it's the best. It's not the best. Like, it's not makeup forever, but it's also not the worst. And I do think it does measure up to some mid-end brands on the market like Too Faced and Smashbox. I think this actually measures up to that kind of formula. They're not bad. They're not like drugstore chalky and just dollar store eyeshadow. They're actually decent eyeshadows, and they actually have good pigmentation based on the colors you're seeing and not the colors you're expecting. So I can't fail it based on that. And the only disappointing row for me is the top row, which is just completely like all highlight shades, and they all look the same to me on my skin tone. So it's like having 1 or 2 shades and then the rest of them are different. You know what I mean? They kind of all look the same on my skin. But apart from that, I think the colors performed really well. There are some nice shades in here. They're mostly satin type finishes, and they have some frosty shimmery shades in here. The fallout is minimal. If you tap off your brush and you use a primer, they blend nicely. They are more subtle colors though, so if you're looking for bright and intense, go for the Kat Von D Mi Vida Loca 2 palette. Go for some Makeup Forever bright eyeshadows. But if you're looking for subtle, wearable, colorful shades, and that makes, I hope that makes sense, like wearable colors, these are probably your bet. They're not bright and like neon pink, but they are still pops of color. And I really think the bottom row is what sealed the deal for me. I was gonna return this, but the bottom row has some really rich, like jewel tone and deep smoky shades that I think are really stellar. They performed really well. And then the rest of the shades are actually really nice. Like these 2 bottom rows are the ones that are the best for me. So I don't know, like I am split on this. I think if you like wearable shades, subtle shades, if you want a collector's item from Gems and the Holograms, if you're nostalgic, if it reminds you of your childhood, you're a 90s baby or a 90s kid, then this is not such a bad palette at all. And I think it's cute, it's priced right, you get a great selection of shades. I think it's pretty nice. I don't think it's the best. It's for me, it's not a hit, it's not a miss, it's just a I'm okay to check out kind of palette. So hopefully this video was helpful. The swatches were helpful in determining if you yourself wanted to try this out. And as usual, I'll leave links to where you can pick this up. It's available at Sephora again. And I'll also leave links to my Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook page where you can follow me along. And if you aren't already subscribed, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It's also right here for you. And until my next video, which will be very soon, I will talk to you. And don't you love how I'm a clapper. I can't help it. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.